Good morning, everyone. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Alan Pennington, and I am the Curious Counselor. Depending on where you're listening, welcome to my YouTube channel or to my Spotify or wherever you're listening to my podcast or video. So this year, I am now trying to upload content to YouTube in addition to Spotify, Apple Podcast, and other places. So wherever you're joining me from, thank you for being here. In this short introduction, I'm going to be telling you a little about who I am, a little bit about what I want to do with the channel, and a little bit about my approach to therapy in general and these podcast YouTube videos in general. So, as I said, I'm Alan Pennington, also the Curious Counselor. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Podcast. I am a marriage and family therapist. I've been doing marriage and family therapy for 10 years now. Wow. And helping people with all different kinds of trauma issues. Trauma has really become my specialty, working with eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. If you're familiar with that, EMDR. If you're not, I did a Spotify on it a while back you can look at. I may do another one on YouTube. I also use internal family systems a lot, the idea that we all have different parts inside us, and when we can help those parts get along, then that helps us to heal and get better, because sometimes our younger parts are the parts that are carrying that hidden trauma that has all that anxiety, worry, fear, or whatever that we carry around. So my general approach to therapy is, let's try to be kind to ourselves, be compassionate in your thoughts, because when you're compassionate in your thoughts, it's okay I'm having a hard time. It's okay that I'm sad. It's okay that I'm angry, or whatever you're feeling. That helps you feel better faster. Then that helps you to be more kind and compassionate to yourself, which then helps you show up as a more compassionate, kind person in your relationships with other people, to just have a happier, more kind, more compassionate life. Because guess what? When you're channeling compassion and kindness through your body, you feel good. You feel happy. You feel just content and joyful. When you're channeling anger and frustration through your body, then you feel anger and frustration. And that just doesn't feel good. So obviously we all get angry and frustrated sometimes, but the more we lean into compassion, the less that anger and frustration will affect us negatively. So these podcast videos, content that I'm putting out, are all about how to help you to be a more kind, compassionate person to yourself, to other people, to bring healing into your own heart and your own emotional self, which then will help you to create better relationships and enjoy your life with other people better. So if this podcast, or in this case, YouTube video, if you're watching the video, I hope I'm going to start getting some people here. I would appreciate your likes, your comments, because that will help me to get more listeners, which will help me to help more people, which I would be very excited about. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Blessings on you wherever you are. And I hope you enjoy the video today, or podcast if that's what you're listening to. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I want to talk to you about a very difficult topic in general, and very difficult for me personally. And that is, why did my marriage fail? And what could I have potentially done to have healed that relationship, if anything? And I walk back through these experiences of mine, partly to continue my healing process, but hopefully to help you maybe to not make some mistakes I made, and hopefully to help you learn to form healthier relationships, learn to navigate differences because there will always be, learn to show up as a healthy version of yourself, and try to understand what that means. Because honestly, if you'd asked me 10 or 15 years ago if I was a healthy version of myself, I would say, I'm not perfect, but yeah, why is my, but then I would have said, why is my wife not happy? I don't know. I'm doing all the things. I mean, I have a good job. I'm making good money. I support the family. I take, out to dinner. I take nice vacations. I do the thing. I don't drink. I don't pornography. I don't have girlfriend. I have never had an affair. I've never, all the things that you hear that people get divorced for, or a lot of them anyway. I didn't do any of those things. So I'm like, why is this not working? Like, we were trying to pray together. We were going to church together. We were trying to do the things. And at one point in our life, I think we both thought if we both leaned into God and leaned into prayer, then that would solve everything. And don't get me wrong, I believe in God, I believe in prayer, and it is absolutely a very, very important component for me of healing. But it didn't get us where we needed to be. You can't just pray yourself into being healthy. And you can't pray your marriage into being fixed. Wish you could. Man, wish I could. If you could, I'd still be married. Because I prayed. Oh my goodness, I prayed. So why didn't our marriage survive? It would be a little bit too easy to say that we didn't get along with each other, which we didn't. That I didn't always treat her with as much kindness and compassion as I could have, which is true. She didn't always show up being as emotionally supportive, available, intimate as I would have liked. True. But a lot of people deal with a lot of those things and they still are able to work out good relationships. Why couldn't we? And the fundamental answer is we didn't know how. And when anybody told us how, we thought we heard them and we thought we executed what they said, but we didn't really hear them and we didn't really understand, so we didn't really execute very well. Because you can hear something up here and you can think you're understanding it and you think you're executing it, but in here, you may be totally missing it. And having a good relationship is about connecting here, but it's also about connecting here. Like being open, being vulnerable, being honest, being, neither one of us did very good at that. The sad truth is I grew up in a household with a father that struggled with alcohol, control, anger, extremely smart, extremely successful business-wise, did the Little League baseball thing, did the camping trip things, did the motorcycle riding things, did the things, was great at doing the things, but never told me he loved me, never hugged me. Like, passed away when he was 80 years old in 2013. Now, he would write in a letter that told me he was proud of me, that he was proud of me, or that he loved me. But he never said he loved me, never hugged me. And And my mother most often was hugging me if she felt bad. Not because I felt bad, because she felt bad, which is not, that kind of energy does not make you feel good. That is not safe, good emotional energy. If you've ever had somebody come up and like, I want to hug you, I want to hug you, I want to hug you, and you're like, oh no, we get like. So I didn't grow up with good, safe, emotional connections. And my ex-wife did not grow up with safe emotional connections. She grew up in a very conservative, religious household, and unfortunately was subject to not only emotional abuse, but physical and sexual abuse for a long time, which led to her having a lot of internal negative messages, which made it difficult to have a healthy relationship. I had my own internal negative messages, made it difficult for me to have a healthy relationship. So if I could roll back the clock and be like, what went wrong? And how could I do this better? The number one thing I would say is I thought I loved myself well, but I really didn't. Like, if you saw me, like, I exercised, I took care of myself, I did hiking, I did scuba diving, I did things that were fun, but I didn't, like, in here, blah, blah, blah. I really didn't take care of myself emotionally because I didn't know how to connect to myself emotionally. How do you know if you know? Because I don't want you to be one of those people that hear this and thinks you hear it, but don't really hear it. And the way to know is if you feel it. And when I started feeling angry after the divorce, and then I went through a lot of sadness, despair, depression, it forces you into internal places that aren't comfortable to go. And ultimately, I had to face that what I really wanted in a relationship was to feel happy, and I really wanted my spouse to make me feel happy. And if I felt happy and she was doing the things that made me feel happy, then I was happy. But if she wasn't doing the things that made me happy, then I wasn't happy. And then I was upset because, well, I'm taking care of her and making her feel good. Isn't it her job to take care of me, make me feel good? Well, no. It's her job to be kind and compassionate to me. It's my job to be kind and compassionate to her. But neither one of us really knew how to do that because neither one of us really knew how to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. When I was 5 years old, and my mother walked in on me when I was masturbating and shamed me about it and was like, and if you, and I'm going to tell your father, like, oh, talk about shame storm. And so I shoved that down. Then something else happened, and I got in trouble, shame storm. Then something else happened. So the way I learned to deal with it is if you do everything right and you're productive and you're smart and you make good grades and you keep the grass cut and you keep, then things go okay. So my internal message was try to make everything go as well as it can. And if things blow up, that means I didn't do it well enough. So ultimately, my internal message that I built my entire childhood and subsequent adult life on is in order to feel safe, not even feel loved, but to feel safe, to feel connected, I have to show up and take care of other people, and I have to do everything like perfectly or as good as perfect as I can. And when I did that, and when I, got a good job, I felt good about that. When I passed exams, I felt good about that. When I made good grades, I felt good about that. When I, got my certification for scuba diving, I felt good about, like when I did stuff, I felt good. And when I got affirmations about what I did, I felt good. But I didn't really feel good about who I was. Because underneath all that, I was a scared little 5-year-old that was afraid that I was going to get caught and get in trouble and get shamed. And so the underlying message is nothing I do is good enough. Because ultimately, you always get in trouble, something goes wrong. I'm not good enough, and people are always going to leave you. And guess what? I kind of created my own self-fulfilling prophecy. And people would leave me, and my ex-wife left me. But since I've been through this divorce and I've started working through this internal pain and stuff and realized that I am enough, I do enough, I am a valuable person, I am lovable, it changes the way that I show up. It changes the way that I interact with people. And then it's like, it's not my job to make you happy. It's really not. It's my job to be nice to you. But ironically, by being nice to you and not worrying about making you happy, you're probably going to be happier, or at least you're going to feel better in whatever you feel. Like maybe you feel sad. Oh, I am so sorry you feel sad. Would you like a hug? But not my job to fix it. You're really angry. I'm so sorry you're so angry. Oh, I can understand all that stuff that happened to you. Ooh, that is awful. Not my job to fix it. Because I thought it was. Because I grew up in a household with an angry person, so I thought it was always my job to fix everybody else's, make them happy. And if I'm like happy, then they'll love me, and then that'll be enough. So I live my life under the assumption of do, but the underlying is I never do enough and I never do it good enough. But I never realized that message was there. Not really. I mean, I sort of knew it was, but I didn't deal with this, 5-year-old internal guy that was just sad, insecure, lonely, not emotionally connecting with anybody because I couldn't emotionally connect with myself. I couldn't grieve. I couldn't feel that shame and be like, it makes sense that I feel shame about that. That was awful that my mother treated me that way, but it wasn't my fault. That was her shame and her trauma. But I didn't know that as a kid. But as I worked through it, then I started feeling better. My ex-wife, because of all of her trauma, had some big safety, still has, I think, some big safety issues. Like the world is not safe, people are not safe, you're not safe, sex is not safe. And I didn't, instead of treating her with compassion, I was like, oh my gosh, I can understand why you feel that way. It's like, why don't you love me? Why don't you want to be with me? Why don't you want to be with me? Why don't you do a better job taking care of the house? Why don't you do a better job taking care of yourself? Like, I would get on myself about doing. So naturally, I would get on her about doing. Not because I wanted to be critical, but that's just the way I thought the world worked. And to some degree it does. It just doesn't work healthily. So naturally, I didn't help her feel safe. She didn't help me feel loved. And the more doing stuff that we tried to connect, it was just more doing. We didn't feel each other's feelings. We didn't validate each other's feelings. We didn't show up for each other emotionally. I just got angry and she just pulled back. And then I would show up and I'd be like, well, things are going pretty well. And she'd be like, well, things seem to be going well. I think this is like, okay. But then something would happen and I would get frustrated and then she would get upset and then we would just be back to square one. And it makes me sad and frustrated that of all the therapists that we went to, not one of them identified this core problem. If one therapist had said to me, Alan, I think you're carrying a lot of deep internal trauma, not your fault, but I think your defense mechanisms to get through your childhood keep you from connecting with that internal child, and the same thing that keeps you from connecting to your internal child is keeping you from connecting to your spouse. I think your spouse had a lot of trauma and she hasn't really connected to her internal child, and because she can't connect to that, she can't connect to you. And if you guys would learn to connect to each other with compassion and validation and listen to each other's stories and be kind to each other, I think you guys could heal. Part of the reason I became a therapist is because I was so frustrated with a lot of the therapy experiences that I had. Now, if I knew what I know now, I probably know some therapists that I think would do a better job. And to those therapists that I saw then, maybe you were trying to say some of those things, but it's surely, I didn't hear it. If you said it, it didn't come across with kindness and compassion. It came across with judgment. And of course, I was real triggered by judgment because that's what I got as a kid all the time. So if you are having trouble in relationship, the key is not to solve the problem you're working on. The key is to understand your partner better and for them to understand you better. But you have got to be the one to start the process of caring about their position, their perspective, their feelings. And when you show up in a healthy way, not only does it make you feel better, they feel safe, and they start showing up in a healthier way. Well, let me give you an example. Couple I was talking to. I'll call them Ann and John. I was talking to Ann. Ann says, bought some new furniture. Great. Was visiting with my parents up in Kentucky, about a 3-hour drive. And I do garage sailing and antiquing, which my husband is fine about. John is like, cool. You like doing that? Great. I've got a budget. It's all good. Bought a piece of furniture. Awesome. We had our Honda Civic. Couldn't get it in the Civic. Didn't have the truck. On the way back home, said, hey, John, can we go back next weekend to my parents so I can pick up the furniture that I bought? John, in his not kind, compassionate way, says, that would be stupid. We just were there. I mean, I don't want to spend 6 hours in the car again and spend all that money on gas. And, that's just dumb. And then Ann was very upset and be like, why don't you ever want to do anything I want to do? All I want to do. And so obviously they had a lot of negative energy going. Nobody was listening to each other. And I said, Ann, I want you to go back to John and say, John, I think you're right. And John kind of was like, what? I wasn't there during the conversation, but she came back and told me later. She said, John, and I gave her the script. I said, John, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to go back to my folks next weekend. And it is a long time to spend in the truck, and it is a lot of gas. And yeah. So you're probably right. But I know that I really am excited about redoing this piece of furniture, and I would like to get it back up there and get that. So when would you feel comfortable with us making a trip back up there to pick that up? And this was like, I don't know, first, second, like, let's call it, May 10th. And he's like, well, I get paid again at the end of the month. How about we go up after I get my paycheck and then we'll get it picked up and then that'll be all great. Oh, and it's like, that's great. That's wonderful. So instead of being like the 14th, it was it was like, I don't know, a week or 10 days later that they went back up. Maybe it was 2 weeks later. But he felt heard and he was like, okay, cool. And then she felt heard and she was like, oh, okay, cool. And so everything is good. But for some reason, we have a hard time getting there. We get triggered and we get defensive. I'm reading a book, Why Don't We Listen Better, which I highly recommend. And he says, if you get defensive, defensiveness causes destruction just as much as offensiveness. So it doesn't matter if you're offensive or defensive. You can be offensive or defensive, but you're basically still lobbing bombs out there. So if somebody says something that triggers you, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Remind yourself, I have an insecure little child in me that's feeling triggered. I need to love that child. They have an insecure little child that's coming out right now. That child really needs some love and compassion. and then be like, what I heard you say is that you're really upset about this, or that you'd really like to do that, or when this happened, that was really difficult, right? How to respond in that difficult situation is a whole topic. How to Fight Better. There's a podcast I did a while back. But the point of it is, my relationship with my ex, not only could we not fight well, couldn't communicate well, we couldn't communicate emotionally. We couldn't hear each other because we couldn't hear ourselves. Like, I had shut down internally, emotionally. I wasn't good with connecting with my emotions. She was pretty good with connecting with her emotions. She just wasn't good about getting down, I think, and really feeling her stuff, which then she didn't have a lot of compassion for her younger self, and then so she didn't have a lot of compassion for me, and I didn't have a lot of compassion for my younger self. I didn't have a lot of compassion for her. But we've got to be willing to listen to each other's stories. Like, really, not like be quiet and think about what you're going to say, but really listen, reflect, validate, and feel that person's feelings with them. Like, oh, I am so sad that happened. I am so angry with you. I can totally understand. Like, when we connect with people emotionally, that's what creates a good relationship. When we stay disconnected emotionally, it doesn't matter if we do all of the right things. Doing the right things doesn't create a safe emotional connection. I could buy flowers. I could take her out to dinner. I could take her on nice trips. I could make the bed. I could clean the house. I can do. But if I'm not showing up emotionally and being willing to talk, and if you can't show up emotionally for your partner or spouse, then be curious about, why am I having trouble showing up emotionally? What is being triggered in me that I'm having a hard time listening to their story and being compassionate? It's compassion and curiosity, because ultimately, if you're compassionate to yourself, you get to feel better. If you're compassionate to the person you're talking to, you get to feel better. Like, if they receive it or don't receive it, you're channeling compassion through your body. And guess what you feel in your body? Compassion. If you're channeling anger through your body, guess what you feel? Anger. Nobody gets angry and yells and screams at somebody and then goes, oh, wow, man, I feel better now. That was great. Right? Well, maybe a sociopath, but I'm not talking to that 0.01% or whatever it is. But, and if you are struggling with that, then God bless you. But for the vast majority of us, channeling good, kind, compassionate, calm, prayerful energy is what we need. In Galatians 6:2, Paul says, bear each other's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So it's not just physically bearing them, but emotionally bearing them. Like, love is the fulfillment of the law. Romans 10:13. Faith, hope, and love, but love is the greatest. And love is all about feeling. Love is all about feeling. Little thumb came up. That's funny. So let yourself feel your feelings. And if they don't feel good, validate them. Wow, it makes sense that you feel that way. Let yourself process that. And sometimes it's like, don't be trapped by the message, I'm not good enough. Don't be trapped by the message, I have to make everybody else happy. Don't be trapped by the message, if I don't do enough, people are going to leave me. Like, those are all the negative messages we learned in childhood. The truth is, you are enough. The truth is, you do enough. The truth is, you are a nice, kind person when you are in your calm, nice person persona, but that's really the core of who you are. When you're getting triggered and you're angry and you're afraid and you're sad and you're ashamed, then that's your reactive persona. And none of us are nice when we're in our reactive persona. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. Be compassionate in your thoughts about yourself. Be kind in your actions toward yourself. Be compassionate in your thoughts about other people. Be kind in your words and actions towards other people. Being kind in your words and actions also means being willing to be emotionally vulnerable and creating a safe emotional space for yourself and for other people. And that's what I missed. I was great at doing the stuff. I mean, if doing the stuff, gets you the gold medal, I was there. But it's not doing the stuff. It's letting yourself be compassionate to your feelings and be compassionate to your partner's feelings. I just listened to another podcast, Peter Crone, on This Chat Saved Her Marriage. And that's essentially what he's talking to. I'll put that down here in the podcast. If you're watching the video, I'll add it in here. This Chat Saved Her Marriage on YouTube by Peter Crone. And it really emphasized a lot of these ideas. We carry these negative internal messages, and subconsciously our entire lives are driven by that we're afraid, we're ashamed, we feel unsafe, we feel unlovable. And our words, our actions, everything is driven by that, but we don't realize it until we look inside ourselves. So I just want to pray good energy and healing for you today, that you can learn to be more compassionate to yourself, learn to feel your feeling in a more real, compassionate, healing way, and you can create safe space for other people to feel their feelings, whether it's your spouse or your children. Like, our children need boundaries, they need rules, they need consequences, but they don't need to be yelled at, and in my opinion, they don't need to be spanked. Like, you spank your kid, and then the kid hits their sibling, and you're like, why is the kid hitting the sibling? Guess where they learned that? Like, when you're kind and compassionate to them, you can set rules and say, well, if you do this or don't do that, then you don't get this or you don't get that, or you have to sit in timeout, or you don't get dessert, or you don't get to watch your favorite TV program, or you lose your iPad, or whatever. But you can be kind about it. Like, these are what the rules are, and if you follow the rules, this happens, and if you don't follow the rules, this happens. But if you're getting angry and yelling, then you're coming from your trauma self, and then you're creating a trauma self in your kids. So, which that's going to be a topic for another conversation. So, but for today's conversation, let me just say I love you just the way you are. Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for that. And I'm trying to love myself just the way I am. And love the people around me just the way they are. And don't get mad when they show up as their trauma self, because that only creates more trauma. If you get mad at them for being mad, if you get ugly at them for being ugly, then we just have more ugliness, which unfortunately is what I did a lot, because I didn't know better. I didn't understand these concepts of owning your own emotions, breathing, stretching, shaking out the negative energy, and then showing up with your own positive energy. Oh, Jesus, help us to show up with more love for ourselves, more love for other people, more compassion, more understanding, more patience, and bring more healing to ourselves and to each other. That's the key. Emotional healing, being open with ourselves emotionally, owning our own negative messages, embracing the positive messages. I'm enough. I'm loved. Not my job to make everybody else happy. Just my job to be kind and compassionate to myself and kind and compassionate to others. Breathe into that. If I had known everything I knew 10 years ago, could I have turned my marriage around? I don't know, but I could have handled it better. My ex might have received it or she might not have. But that's not my job. My job is to show up as my kind, compassionate self, and I certainly didn't consistently do that. Certainly not in a way to make a safe space for her to express her emotions and to validate those emotions. So I'm going to make 2 recommendations, and I'll put them down here. One is Why Don't We Listen Better? Great book. The other is this podcast by Peter Crone on This Chat Saved Her Marriage. And then, of course, I wrote a book that I'm also reading on here. I'm going to put up, or have put up, depending on when I post this one, the intro in chapters 1 and 2 to Crisis to Calm. So if you have this, great. If you want this, I'm going to be posting YouTube videos. You can also find it on Amazon as a Kindle version or as a paperback version. So, yeah. So if this resonated for you, if this was helpful, I would appreciate if you would leave me a like or subscribe to my channel so that hopefully I can spread some more kind, compassionate energy out into the world. And hopefully when you receive this, maybe you can spread some more kind, compassionate energy into the world. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing this time with me. I hope to see you here again soon, or on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And until then, I hope that you will channel good emotional energy and compassion for yourself and others, kindness in your words and actions, curiosity about all things. I am Alan Pennington, and I am the Curious Counselor.